Can you provide some examples of how your partner and or family members felt prepared to support you through your birth experience?
When we took the birthing classes, the Saturday and Sunday classes, we made out a hopes and wishes list, and we went through, what we had originally planned for, and what some alternatives might be if we weren't able to have our hopes and wishes come true, or take place, unfold. So we actually felt really prepared if the hopes and wishes didn't come through as planned. And what actually happened is when we got to the hospital, our labor and delivery did not take place. Was not able to happen the way that we had planned. We had originally planned to labor as long as we could at home, and then come to the hospital at the very latest as possible. But I ended up actually being induced. So we were at the hospital before labor began. Labor had to begin not naturally. So that was a disappointment, but we were well prepared for it. We knew that that was a possibility. As well, some of the comfort measures that we had originally planned for, none of them could be utilized. So as soon as we got to the hospital, we found out that I could only stay in the bed. So I had to labor in the hospital bed. So that was not at all what we had planned for. But luckily, Maud had some really creative solutions. We talked to the nursing staff. We worked with them, really closely. And Maud was really an advocate for us to say, this is what we had planned for. We really wanted to do some additional comfort measures. And they were pretty flexible with us, and we were able to really be creative with birthing balls and, kind of not have to stay stationary in the hospital bed. So that made a huge difference, and we were really well prepared for that, even though it wasn't ideal.
Some examples to feel prepared for the birth experience is the reading materials that Babeeze and Arms have provided, the different resources, also with the community, as well as trying to narrow down the information. There's so much out there, but they're able to give you the tools and resources that are available, that are updated. Also, different tricks and information and materials that we can use to feel more comfortable and help us with the Labor Day. So we have been able to share those among our friends, and also Sanju and I have been able to use those resources or get those resources to feel more comfortable with our Labor Day. So we're very excited.
I would say when I got pregnant, I thought that, it's pretty simple. Your body takes care of it. You grow the baby, make sure you're well nourished, and then labor comes, and I was really anticipating that and a little nervous for it. But I didn't realize until kind of the push got on to make sure that we informed ourselves of, different stages of pregnancy and development and what can go on in labor, how little I actually knew. Turns out you don't necessarily grow up knowing about just the natural things that unfold during pregnancy and labor, and then also things that can happen. Mm-hmm. And I was so glad right around the period that was happening was when we got connected with Jill and Babeeze in Arms, and we started prenatal classes, and thankfully finished our classes before we had the baby. Silly me, I thought maybe we'd have that baby early. Oh no, we went overdue. But even that was something that we learned about and could anticipate and feel that it was normal, mm-hmm. because we'd been informed. And I think that's the biggest thing, of being equipped with information. And Babeeze in Arms is a huge source of that, because you can go on the internet and try and sift out the horror stories that you'll read, or which, that's a separate thing of itself, of things being blown out of proportion, but you might think that that's normal. But you need to talk to someone instead who has experienced kind of the whole gamut. Jill, our doula, she'd had 5 babies of her own and had experienced like every kind of birth you could have had. And that was really cool. I'm sure she didn't plan that before she embarked on this career, but it was really helpful for us to think that that person's really well qualified. And so when she's giving us this information, I know that it has a basis and a foundation, and that I think really equipped us for when things came. I knew what was coming and it felt normal. I didn't need to be afraid because I knew it was coming. I can remember being in labor and kind of I had decided I didn't want to have an epidural and I wanted to labor without any sort of medication or anything. And I remember right around the time that you're in a period of labor called transition, which means you don't really have that much further to go, but it's the hardest period. I remember thinking, I can't do this. I cannot do this. Like, I don't care if you offered me a cow tranquilizer right now, I would take it, which I knew is totally counter to what I really wanted, but I was just starting to lose my courage. And I remembered a moment when we were in class, when we were in our prenatal class, where Jill said, a time will come when you will think you can't do it. When anyone will think, if you've had an epidural, even if you're in the hospital, everyone will get to that point where you think, this is really hard. I don't know how much I have left. And that information really helped me push through, thinking, okay, you're feeling scared, and being scared makes this an unpleasant experience, but don't be afraid because you knew this was going to happen. And sure enough, just like we had learned, being well equipped with all that information and that knowledge and teaching, that time passed, and shortly after, woohoo!
I'd say having Alyssa, it was nice having the unbiased, honest opinion. We'd ask a question and it wouldn't be flowered up or any kind of response. It was just very honest and truthful, and even though we may not have wanted to hear the answer, it was still nice to know all of the aspects of what we were asking. And also for the birthing process, um, even about the hospital and stuff, she had information about that. So, how it would go when we go into the hospital, the admitting process, just very honest opinions, which
we did the prenatal classes here at Babeeze in Arms, and that was awesome for just giving us some experience, practical experience, some hands-on experience on how to go through the different exercises and different techniques for breathing and comfort measures, and just knowing what you can do to really help, how I can help my wife, the night or during the day of labor. There's lots of different techniques and exercises you can do.
The solutions that Maud came up with throughout the process were amazing, as far as with my wife being hooked up to a fetal monitor, that really restricted anything. She couldn't walk around, couldn't go more than 3 feet away from the bed, and between the ball and leaning over the bed and providing massages, helping Christine through all the contractions, it was amazing. The support there. We were prepared for these options, of course. Like any parent, we thought there's no way that it's going to go awry, but when it did, we were able to roll with it without that panic that could set in if you haven't gone through those classes or anything.
I found through her knowledge, she seemed to know the ideal process of having a baby and potentially what could go wrong, and she walked us through. Over here is the ideal childbirth. On the other side is some potential things that might happen, but don't worry, these are the steps the doctors will take, these are the steps we'll take to get through them. And also I have to mention, at one point, my mother-in-law was a little apprehensive about the whole childbirthing process, and Alyssa agreed to meet the mother-in-law, and I know the mother-in-law,
she loved it.
She loved it. She came in and we sat down for an hour and a half, and we had a nice chat, and she actually calmed not only our nerves, but my mother-in-law, Bev's nerves as well. Yeah,
my mom felt so much comfortable with having Alyssa there, and knowing all the information that she provided. And not only did Alyssa answer our questions, but when my mom got to meet her, my mom got to ask questions and got to know her as well.
For me, talking about preparedness, I think our relationship with Babeeze in Arms and with Jill certainly had a big impact on me. Oftentimes I think the husband tends to feel during a pregnancy, whether it's a first or a fourth, that they're just along for the ride, and that they don't have an awful lot to contribute either during the pregnancy or during the birth. And I think some of that is cultural, some of that is maybe just a male thing. And what I got through our time with Babeeze in Arms with Jill was a feeling that the sense that I was going to be able to contribute during the pregnancy and during the birth, and it certainly came to pass that way too, where I felt like I wasn't just along for the ride, but that I was going to be able to actually be a real support for Sarah through all of this. And the same was true during our second pregnancy, because each pregnancy, each birth is different, where I felt like I was playing an important part in it. And I think a lot of husbands can miss out on that if they're not prepared. And I certainly, it proved true for me that I was ready. I didn't feel scared about jumping in and trying to help, especially during the birth process.
Yeah, especially that second pregnancy, we decided to get our doula again, partly because of the relationship we established the first time we were pregnant. I just couldn't imagine her not being there. Like, if I had 10 babies, I would want Jill to be there because she really feels like family. I love her, and I want to share kind of that whole birth process with her, right along with, you know, taking pictures with the grandparents. I want Jill in there holding my baby so I can take a picture. But the second pregnancy, I think we talked a little bit about thinking, are we being sort of silly? Like, we're well equipped. We know this whole deal, right? We've had a baby before. Do we really need a doula? And that pregnancy was very different. But then again, it's all going on inside. So, you know, the fact that I was bigger and it was a boy and instead of a girl, like our first pregnancy. But we could not have anticipated how different the birth would be. Every baby is different. And when we were in that moment, although I was concentrating on contractions, I was thinking, I'm so glad that Jill is here.
To help guide us through.
Oh, it just goes to show that even if you've done this before, there's so much support and comfort that can be gleaned, I think, from having a doula there. Because it's not really about that you can't do it without a doula, but it makes it so much more pleasant with when some unexpected things happen with our baby. Our second baby was 10 pounds and 3 ounces. He was ginormous. I could not believe it. When he was actually born and the midwives all gasped, I knew that we must have a really big baby. And the labor was so much harder than with my first. So I was just so glad that she was there and made that whole process really positive. And you only know those things in retrospect, right? So
and certainly not just, it wasn't just moral support. I mean, she played a key role in helping Sarah through the labor. And when we think back on the guidance she provided on when we were going to change positions, when we were going to try and slow things down or speed things up or move from one spot to another, trying to rest in between, it was huge. I can't imagine. Again,
or even some of the serious stuff where we had decided with our second baby to have the baby at home because we had a spontaneous home birth for our first baby. It was so great. We were eating cookies on our bed 20 minutes after our daughter was born. It was fantastic. So second time around, we're like, yeah, we're going to have this baby at home. And then the labor was longer and more difficult. And I was starting to get scared. You know, the midwives were there and they were great, overseeing sort of the health of the baby and all, because that's what they're focused on. But it was helpful to have Jill, again, that sort of that trusted friend there to anticipate, I think, some of the things that would be going through my head. Because at one point I was thinking, like, do we need to call someone because this baby's not coming out? And every time they'd check, it was like he wasn't any closer to being born. And then they discovered, you know, the baby's in a bad position. I had to do some really challenging things during the labor and even having to breathe through some contractions, which is surprisingly difficult. Like, Jill was right here, like right at my face and encouraging me and counting the contractions with me and helping me do something. I thought I was done like 6 hours before I was spent. I just thought there was nothing left, and there was something left, and I was able to do it. And I absolutely credit Jill with making that what could have been I think a really hard and scary, or at least not pleasant experience, into a really fantastic memory and birth story for our little boy.